A homeless 19-year-old girl inherits a broken machine shop from the grandfather she thought had abandoned her, expecting nothing but rust and regret. But inside that broken machine shop, she uncovers a hidden secret worth $200 million, one powerful enough to put her life in danger and change her future forever. What begins as survival quickly becomes a fight for truth, legacy, and family. Subscribe for more powerful stories, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Scarlett Turner still remembered the sound of the metal spoon scraping the bottom of her bowl that morning, the last breakfast she would ever eat in a foster facility. At 19 years old, she had exactly $52 in her pocket, no home to go to, and nowhere safe to sleep that night. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a cold glow across the room as if the world itself had already decided she didn't belong in it. Across from her sat her younger brother, Owen, just 15, with tired eyes that had seen far too much for someone his age. He wasn't eating. He was watching her, silently asking the question neither of them wanted to say out loud, "Are you really leaving me behind?" For years, Scarlett had been his protector, his shield against the chaos of a system that never stayed long enough to care. But today, the rules said she had to walk away. Then everything changed. A worn envelope slid across the table from the facility director. Inside was something impossible, an inheritance. A broken-down machine shop in a dying town called Blackridge, Texas. Left behind by a grandfather she believed had abandoned them a decade ago. To Scarlett, it felt less like a gift, and more like reopening an old wound. Scarlett barely felt her legs as she followed the facility director down the narrow hallway, the envelope clutched tightly in her hands. The world around her seemed muted, like everything had been wrapped in cotton. Just minutes ago, her biggest concern had been where she would sleep that night. Now, suddenly, there was this. Inside the small office, the air smelled faintly of old paper and cheap coffee. The director sat down slowly, folding her hands as if choosing her words carefully. "Scarlett," she began, her voice softer than usual, "your grandfather passed away last year. His estate has finally cleared probate." Scarlett froze. Grandfather. The word hit her like something pulled from a distant dream, faded, fragile, and filled with unanswered questions. A man she hadn't seen in 10 years. A man she had spent most of her life believing had chosen to walk away. "He left everything to you." Everything. The word didn't feel real. With trembling fingers, Scarlett opened the envelope. Inside were legal documents, neatly printed and impossibly official. A deed. 40 acres of land. A property located in a place she had never heard of, Blackridge, Texas. And at the center of it all, a machine shop. A broken down, abandoned machine shop. Her chest tightened. That was it? That was what he left behind? But then she saw the check. A crisp, corporate-issued check for $15,000, made out to her name. Her breath caught. The director leaned forward. "A company called Dominion Energy has been trying to acquire that property for some time. This is their offer, as is. If you accept, the money will be transferred within 48 hours. $15,000. To anyone else, it might not have sounded like much. But to Scarlett, it was everything. It was rent. Food. Safety. A chance to breathe without fear for the first time in her life. It was survival. Her fingers tightened around the check. But then the director said something that changed everything. "There's also a provision regarding your brother." Scarlett looked up sharply. "Because Owen is still a minor, he remains under state custody," the director continued. "However, if you can demonstrate stable housing and a reliable source of income within 6 months, you can petition for legal guardianship." The room went completely silent. Scarlett felt her heart begin to pound, slow at first, then faster, louder, until it was all she could hear. 6 months. That was all she had. 6 months to build a life strong enough to bring her brother home. Her mind raced. Take the money. Find a small apartment. Get a job, Any job. Play it safe. That was the logical choice. That was the smart choice. But something didn't sit right. Why would a corporation pay $15,000 for a property no one wanted? A collapsing building in a dying town? Land that had been sitting untouched for years? Scarlett looked back down at the documents. The machine shop. Her grandfather's machine shop. A place she barely remembered. Yet somehow couldn't ignore. I don't understand, she said quietly. Why do they want it so badly? The director hesitated. I don't have that information. But their interest has been persistent. Persistent. That word sent a chill down Scarlett's spine. This wasn't just a random offer. This meant something. And deep down, she felt it, an instinct she couldn't explain. That this broken, forgotten place might be more than it seemed. That it might be the key to everything. To her future. To Owen. To the truth about the man who had left them behind. She exhaled slowly, her decision forming before she could second guess it. I need to see it, she said. The director blinked. You don't have to decide right away. I'm not selling something I've never even seen, Scarlett interrupted, her voice steady now. Stronger than she felt. I need to know what it is first. A pause. Then the director nodded slowly. That can be arranged. Scarlett stood up, gripping the envelope like it was the only solid thing in her world. For the first time in years, she wasn't just reacting to life. She was choosing it. And somehow, she knew. Whatever was waiting in Blackridge, Texas. It was going to change everything. The road to Blackridge, Texas felt longer than it should have. Scarlett sat by the window of the bus, her fingers tightly gripping the envelope, her thoughts spinning in every direction. Beside her, Owen leaned against the glass, watching empty fields stretch endlessly into the horizon. Neither of them said much. Because deep down, they both felt it. This trip wasn't just about an inheritance. It was about answers. When they finally arrived, Blackridge looked like a town time had forgotten. Storefronts stood empty. Paint peeled from old signs. Even the air felt still, too still. And then they saw it. The machine shop. Scarlett stopped walking. Her chest tightened. The building looked like it was barely holding itself together. Rust spread across the metal walls like old scars. The sign above the entrance, Turner Fabrication and Engineering, was faded, half the letters missing. This is what he left us? Owen whispered. Scarlett didn't answer. She pushed the door open. The hinges let out a long, painful scream. Inside, dust hung thick in the air. Sunlight filtered through dirty windows, casting long shadows across abandoned tools and silent machines. Everything felt frozen, like no one had dared touch it in years. In the center sat an old pickup truck. Rust-covered. Forgotten. Useless. Scarlett stepped closer, her boots echoing against the concrete floor. Her throat tightened as anger rose in her chest. This was it? This was what her grandfather chose over them? Her hands clenched. Maybe she should just sell it. Take the money. Forget all of this. Scarlett. Owen's voice broke through her thoughts. Something in his tone made her turn immediately. He was crouched near the back corner, staring at the ground. There's something wrong here. Scarlett walked over, her pulse quickening. The concrete beneath his hand looked slightly different, smoother. Almost intentional. Owen knocked on it. Hollow. They froze. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then adrenaline took over. It took nearly 20 minutes to find a crowbar. Scarlett's hands shook as she forced it into the edge of the concrete panel. It resisted, like it was protecting something. Then, crack. The seal broke. A hidden hatch lifted open. A cold breath of air rose from below. Inside, a steel box. Clean. Untouched. Hidden on purpose. Scarlett's heart pounded violently as she pulled it out. The lock snapped after one hard strike. She hesitated for just a second. Then opened it. And everything changed. Inside were stacks of documents, perfectly preserved. Blueprints. Engineering schematics. Patent filings filled with complex designs that made her head spin. She grabbed the first one. Her eyes scanned the page. Then stopped. Owner, Scarlett Turner. Her name. Filed years ago. Her breath caught. What is this? Owen whispered. Scarlett flipped through more pages, faster now. Energy systems. Storage technology. Designs far beyond anything she understood, but one thing was clear. This wasn't scrap. This was revolutionary. Then she saw it. Clipped to the back of one of the patent files. A valuation report. Her hands froze. Her eyes locked onto the number. Estimated market value, $200 million. The world seemed to go silent. 200 million? Scarlett whispered. Owen stared at her. What? She slowly turned the page toward him. His face went pale. The air in the room shifted instantly. This wasn't just an inheritance anymore. This was a fortune. No. This was something people would fight for. Maybe even kill for. Beneath the documents sat bundles of cash, thousands of dollars. And under that, a sealed letter. But Scarlett couldn't read it yet. Because now she understood. That company, she said slowly. Owen looked at her. They weren't buying the land. Her voice hardened. They were trying to bury this. Silence filled the shop, thick, heavy, electric. Everything made sense now. The pressure. The urgency. The lowball offer. They thought she would walk away without ever knowing. Scarlett slowly closed the box. But this time, her hands were steady. Her fear was gone. Replaced by something stronger. Determination. She looked around the broken shop again. But now she didn't see ruin. She saw power. Legacy. Truth. They underestimated me, she said quietly. Owen stepped closer. So what do we do? Scarlett met his eyes. And for the first time, she didn't look lost. She looked ready. We don't sell. Her voice was calm. Unshakable. We fight. Scarlett's hands hovered over the sealed letter at the bottom of the box. For a moment, she couldn't move. Everything she thought she knew about her grandfather, every memory, every wound, every unanswered question, pressed down on her chest all at once. He left us, she whispered. Owen didn't respond. Because they had both believed that for 10 years. Scarlett slowly picked up the letter. The paper was aged, the edges softened with time, as if it had been handled more than once. Or written with trembling hands. Her fingers shook as she unfolded it. The first line blurred her vision instantly. My dearest Scarlett. Her breath caught. Not to whom it may concern. Not cold. Not distant. Personal. Painfully personal. She swallowed hard and kept reading. If you are reading this, then I am gone. And you are finally old enough to understand the truth. The words hit her like a wave. Truth? Her heart began to pound. I know you believe I abandoned you. I know you have every reason to hate me. But I need you to understand. I didn't leave because I didn't love you. Scarlett's grip tightened on the paper. Her chest ached. I left because I loved you more than my own life. A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. Owen moved closer, reading over her shoulder now. In 2014, I created something I should never have shown anyone. A new energy system, powerful enough to change the world. And dangerous enough to make the wrong people notice. Scarlett's pulse quickened. Dominion. They came to me with offers at first. Money. Contracts. Promises. But when I refused, everything changed. Her breathing grew shallow. They started watching the house. Following you. Following Owen. Scarlett froze. Her eyes widened. They took pictures. Sent messages. Made it clear that if I didn't cooperate, they would use you to break me. No, Owen whispered. Scarlett felt like the ground beneath her was collapsing. I tried to fight them. I tried to protect you and keep you close. But I realized something I will regret for the rest of my life. I couldn't do both. Her hands trembled violently now. So I made the only choice I had left. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. I sent you away. Silence filled the shop. Heavy. Crushing. Scarlett couldn't breathe. Not because I didn't want you. But because it was the only way to keep you alive. The letter slipped slightly in her hands. 10 years. 10 years of pain. Of believing she wasn't wanted. Of thinking she wasn't enough. And all of it had been a lie. I thought. Her voice broke. Owen grabbed her arm, his own eyes red. I never stopped watching over you, the letter continued. I tracked every placement. I wrote letters, hundreds of them. But they were returned. Blocked. Lost in a system that was supposed to protect you. Scarlett's knees felt weak. She sank down slowly onto the cold concrete floor. Every birthday. Every Christmas. I remembered. Even when you couldn't remember me. Tears streamed freely now. Not quiet tears. Not controlled. The kind that come from years of pain breaking all at once. The patents are in your name because I needed to make sure no one could take this from you. The prototype is hidden where no one would ever look. Scarlett's heart raced. The truck. Everything connected. If Dominion ever comes back, and they will, do not trust them. Her eyes hardened through the tears. And Scarlett, if there is one thing I ask of you. She held her breath. Please don't remember me as the man who left you. A pause. Then the final line. Remember me as the man who chose to lose everything. So you could have a future. The letter slipped from her hands. Scarlett broke. A sob tore through her chest as she covered her face, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably. 10 years. 10 years of anger. Of hate. Of believing she had been abandoned. And the truth. The truth was love. Fierce. Painful. Unimaginable love. Owen dropped beside her, wrapping his arms around her tightly. He didn't leave us, he whispered. Scarlett shook her head, crying harder. No. He saved us. The shop no longer felt empty. It didn't feel abandoned. It felt protected. Preserved. Waiting. Scarlett slowly wiped her tears, her breathing still uneven, but something inside her had changed. The anger was gone. Replaced by something stronger. Purpose. She picked the letter back up, holding it carefully this time. I was wrong about him, she said quietly. Owen looked at her. So what does that mean? Scarlett stood up slowly, her eyes no longer lost, but burning with clarity. It means, she said, her voice steady despite everything she felt. We're not just fighting for money anymore. A pause. Her grip tightened around the letter. We're fighting for him. The letter stayed in Scarlett's hand long after she finished reading it. The paper felt heavier now. Not because of what it was made of. But because of what it meant. Everything had changed. The anger she had carried for 10 years was gone. Replaced by something far more dangerous. Truth. And with that truth came a choice. Scarlett stood in the middle of the shop, the steel box open beside her, the patent spread across the workbench, the number $200 million still burned into her mind. $200 million. Enough to change everything. Enough to make all the pain disappear. Owen broke the silence first. We could sell it, he said quietly. Scarlett didn't respond. He stepped closer, his voice careful, almost fragile. We could take the money. Get a house. You could get me out of the system right away. We wouldn't have to fight anyone. His words weren't wrong. They were logical. Safe. Exactly what she had wanted her whole life. No more fear. No more uncertainty. No more sleeping with one eye open, wondering what tomorrow would take away. Just peace. Scarlett closed her eyes for a moment. She could see it. A small house somewhere quiet. A real bed. Food in the fridge. Owen safe. Happy. Finally free. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. But then, another image pushed its way in. Her grandfather. Alone in this shop. Working late into the night. Watching the door. Listening for threats that never stopped coming. Choosing. Every single day. To keep going anyway. Not for money. Not for fame. But for them. He gave up 10 years, Scarlett said softly. Owen looked at her. What? He gave up everything. So we could have a chance to live. Her voice trembled, but it didn't break. And the first thing we do is sell it to the same people who destroyed his life? The words hung in the air. Owen looked down. Scarlett took a slow breath, trying to steady the storm inside her. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about what kind of person she was going to be. A survivor. Or someone who stood for something. A sudden sound cut through the silence. A car engine. Both of them froze. Scarlett's heart dropped. Owen moved toward the window, wiping away dust with his sleeve. His face changed instantly. Scarlett. Her chest tightened. What? There are 3 black SUVs outside. Time seemed to stop. Scarlett didn't need to ask who it was. She already knew. They found us, Owen whispered. Scarlett's pulse slammed in her ears. This was it. The moment her grandfather had warned her about. The moment everything became real. Fear crept in. Cold. Sharp. Paralyzing. She could still walk away. She could still take the deal. And this before it even started. The shop door creaked open slowly. Heavy footsteps echoed across the concrete floor. Scarlett turned. A tall man in a perfectly tailored suit stepped inside, his presence calm. Controlled. Dangerous. Behind him, 2 others followed silently. He smiled. But it didn't reach his eyes. Scarlett Turner, he said smoothly. I'm Daniel Hayes. CEO of Dominion Energy. The name hit like a punch. Owen stepped closer to Scarlett, his hand gripping her sleeve. Hayes glanced around the shop, his expression barely hiding his disdain. Tough place, he said casually. But let's not pretend that's what matters. He placed a sleek folder on the workbench. Then looked directly at her. I'm here to make your life easier. Scarlett didn't move. Didn't speak. Hayes opened the folder. $200,000 up front, he said. Cash. Clean. No complications. Owen sucked in a breath. Scarlett's heart skipped. 200,000. Right now. No waiting. No risk. Just. Done. Hayes leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice. You're young, he continued. You don't want to get involved in something you don't understand. A pause. Then. Your grandfather made that mistake. The air turned ice cold. Scarlett's eyes lifted slowly to meet his. And something inside her snapped. Not fear. Not doubt. Something stronger. Clarity. She looked at the folder. Then at the patents. Then at the letter still in her hand. And finally. Back at him. You're right, she said quietly. Hayes smiled slightly, thinking he had won. Scarlett's voice hardened. I don't understand everything yet. The smile faded. But I understand enough. She stepped forward. And pushed the folder back toward him. I'm not selling. Silence. Heavy. Dangerous. Hayes studied her for a long moment. Then straightened his suit slowly. This isn't over, he said. Scarlett didn't flinch. I know. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of what came next. The first night after Daniel Hayes left, Scarlett didn't sleep. She sat at the old wooden workbench, the blueprint spread out in front of her like pieces of a puzzle she had no idea how to solve. The dim light above flickered occasionally, casting shifting shadows across the pages, lines, numbers, symbols that felt far beyond her world. 12 hours ago, she had been homeless. Now she was staring at something worth $200 million. And people were already willing to threaten her for it. Her hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from the weight of it all. I don't understand any of this, she admitted quietly. Owen, sitting across from her, didn't look up. Yes, you do, he said. Scarlett frowned. No, I don't. Owen finally lifted his head. You understand why it matters. That stopped her. Because he was right. She didn't need to understand every equation. She understood what it meant. This was their grandfather's life. His sacrifice. His truth. And now, it was theirs. The next morning, everything began to change. Not all at once. But slowly. Deliberately. Scarlett made a decision. If she was going to fight, she couldn't do it as the girl who had nothing. She had to become someone else. Someone stronger. Someone who couldn't be pushed around. She started with the basics. Cleaning the shop. It took hours just to clear a single section. Dust choked the air, tools were rusted, machines barely functional. But with every piece she lifted, every surface she wiped clean, something shifted inside her. This place wasn't broken. It was waiting. Waiting for someone to believe in it again. And for the first time, she did. Owen became something else entirely. Obsessed. While Scarlett worked with her hands, Owen disappeared into the blueprints. Hours passed without him noticing. He traced every line, studied every detail, whispered calculations under his breath like he was unlocking a language only he could understand. You're seeing something, aren't you? Scarlett asked one night. Owen nodded slowly. It's not just storage, he said. It's a closed-loop system. Self-regulating. That's why it's so powerful. Scarlett blinked. You figured that out. From this? Owen gave a small shrug. It just makes sense. She stared at him. For years, the world had treated him like just another kid in the system. Invisible. Replaceable. But here, in this shop, he looked different. Sharp. Focused. Brilliant. And suddenly, Scarlett realized something that hit her just as hard as the $200 million number. Her grandfather hadn't just left them money. He had left them purpose. Days turned into nights. Nights turned into something close to routine. Scarlett learned how to fix machines. How to organize. How to lead. She made calls she was terrified to make. Asked questions she didn't think she had the right to ask. And slowly, people started answering. A local mechanic showed up one afternoon after hearing they were back. Then another. Then someone brought tools. Someone else brought food. They didn't say much. They didn't ask for anything. They just stayed and helped. For the first time in her life, Scarlett wasn't surviving alone. She was building something, with people who believed in her. But the threats didn't stop. If anything, they got worse. Strange cars driving past at night. Phone calls with no one on the other end. The message was clear. Walk away. Scarlett felt the fear. Every single day. But something had changed. Before, fear controlled her. Now, it fueled her. One night, she stood in the middle of the shop, looking around at everything they had rebuilt so far. It still wasn't perfect. But it wasn't broken anymore either. Neither was she. Owen walked up beside her. I think I can make it work, he said. Scarlett turned to him. What do you mean? The prototype, he said. Grandpa left enough notes. I think I can rebuild it. Silence. Scarlett stared at him. You're serious? Owen nodded. His eyes weren't uncertain. They were steady. Confident. I know I can. Scarlett felt something rise in her chest. Not fear. Not doubt. Pride. For the first time in her life, she wasn't just protecting Owen. She was standing beside him. As an equal. As a team. She took a slow breath. Then nodded. Then we build it, she said. And in that moment, the homeless girl who had nothing was gone. In her place stood someone new. Someone stronger. Someone ready. Not just to survive the world, but to change it. The day of the demonstration arrived faster than Scarlett expected. The shop looked completely different now. Clean. Alive. Restored. Where rust and silence once filled the space, there was now light, movement. And people. Dozens of them. Locals. Supporters. Even reporters who had caught wind of the story spreading beyond Blackridge. At the center of it all. The prototype. Small. Unassuming. But powerful enough to change everything. Scarlett stood beside Owen, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might break through her chest. You ready? She asked. Owen nodded. But his voice was quiet. What if it doesn't work? Scarlett looked at him. Then placed a hand on his shoulder. Then we fix it, she said. Just like everything else. A small smile broke across his face. And that was enough. Across the room, a familiar voice echoed. Cut the performance. The air shifted instantly. Scarlett turned. Daniel Hayes. Back again. This time with lawyers. And cameras. He walked in like he owned the place, his expression calm, but his eyes sharp, calculating. This ends today, he said smoothly. Scarlett didn't move. Yeah, she replied. It does. Hayes stepped closer, glancing briefly at the prototype. You're making a mistake, he said quietly. You don't have the infrastructure. The protection. The resources. A pause. Without us. This dies here. Scarlett met his gaze. For the first time. She didn't feel small. You're wrong, she said. Then she gestured around the shop. We already have everything we need. People stepped forward. The mechanic who had helped rebuild the machines. The neighbors who stood guard at night. The community that refused to let them fall. They weren't alone anymore. Not even close. Hayes's expression hardened. This is your last chance, he said. Sign the deal. Or lose everything in court. Scarlett reached into her pocket. And pulled out her phone. She pressed play. Hayes's own voice filled the room. A recording of his threat from days before. Your grandfather made that mistake. The room went silent. The lawyers froze. The reporters leaned in. Hayes didn't move. But something behind his eyes shifted. Scarlett took a step forward. We also have video evidence of forged documents, she continued. And records of intimidation. Another pause. You don't own this, she said. And you never will. For the first time. Daniel Hayes had nothing to say. Within weeks, everything unraveled. Investigations opened. Evidence surfaced. More stories came out, other inventors, other threats, other lives quietly destroyed. Dominion Energy wasn't just exposed. It was dismantled. And in the middle of it all, Scarlett and Owen stood their ground. The day they turned the prototype on. No one breathed. Scarlett's hand hovered over the switch. She closed her eyes for just a second. Thinking of her grandfather. Of everything he had lost. Of everything he had protected. This is for you, she whispered. Then. She flipped it. A low hum filled the air. Soft at first. Then stronger. The lights flickered. And came alive. Not just in the shop, but outside. Streetlights, homes, buildings across Blackridge began to glow, steady, clean, powerful. A ripple of light spreading outward. The crowd erupted. Cheers. Tears. Disbelief. Owen grabbed her arm. "We did it," he said, his voice breaking. Scarlett looked at him. At the boy who had once felt invisible. Now standing in the center of something extraordinary. "Yeah," she whispered. "We did. But the biggest change wasn't the money. It wasn't the headlines. It wasn't even the technology. It was this." They stayed. Instead of selling, Scarlett made a different choice. She created something new. A foundation. One that would bring affordable energy to small towns like Blackridge. Places the world had forgotten. Just like they once had been. The shop became more than a business. It became a training center. A second chance. For kids aging out of the system. For people who needed a place to start again. And for the first time in her life, Scarlett had more than survival. She had purpose. She had people. She had family. Owen stood beside her one evening, watching the town lights glow in the distance. "Do you think he'd be proud?" he asked. Scarlett smiled softly, looking out at everything they had built. "I think," she said. "He never stopped believing we could do this. And for the first time, they believed it too." Scarlett Turner's journey is a powerful reminder that the truth is often hidden beneath pain we don't yet understand. For years, she believed she had been abandoned, left behind by the one person who was supposed to protect her. But when the truth finally came to light, she realized something life-changing. Love doesn't always look the way we expect it to. Her story also teaches us that what appears broken, useless, or worthless on the surface can hold unimaginable value. A forgotten machine shop turned out to hold a $200 million legacy, not just in money, but in purpose. More importantly, Scarlett proved that strength doesn't come from having the perfect start. It comes from refusing to give up, from standing your ground even when fear is louder than confidence. And in the end, she discovered the most important truth of all. Family isn't just about who stays, it's about who fights for you, even when you're not there to see it. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it today. Tell me in the comments. What would you have done in Scarlett's position? Take the money and walk away, or stay and fight for the truth? Your story might inspire someone else more than you think.